episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash. I can't talk today, probably because I'm so nervous because we have a longtime favorite guest on the show, Bengal. Welcome back to Stay Hot. I don't even know how long it's been. I was trying to come up with a number before the show, and I know it's somewhere between 6 months and a year, and I think it's closer to a year than it is 6 months, but I could be wrong. But how are you doing?
You know, a professional would have redone that intro, but I'm great.
Why?
I don't know. I'm just having a good time. I see you guys got a new lizard man in the top left.
We do.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know his name though? Are you a real fan?
No.
I was trying to remember
can I
for a
guess?
second myself.
Can I get a hint?
Guess, but you're not going to get it. It starts with an H, but it's not Hugo.
Oh, Hugo would have been my first guess.
Right.
Is it like Hervé, like Herve? Is he like French? Hervé?
I think in terms of like weird naming conventions, you're on the right track, but no.
There's not
breaking. Like
there's
a Greek god.
No, it's. I'll just give it away. You'll never guess it.
Yeah.
It's Huel. I don't know what.
Just was watching Better Call Saul too. That should have been in the. Should have been in the brain
mind palace.
Yeah.
Say Mind Palace? I gotta go, dude. This Mind Palace. That's an interesting one.
What a pull.
Well, we have a lot of respect for your mind palace, Bengal. That's why you're on here. Right. When you go into your whatever
Low
your mode
standards.
is, where you're just like thinking, and who knows what you think about in there. We want to know what you think about the draft prospects, though. What do we want to start with? The quarterbacks?
I mean, that's
start with
the coolest, most popular
seems-
position. I think we should start with the quarterbacks.
I think people like
You know, the Giants might need one at number 6. What do you think about that? Like, are you the industry standard? I guess not so much the industry standard as much as it is the Twitter standard. Like, May and Caleb are the top 2 easily, and then there's a drop off. Or are you a Jayden guy, or what's your deal with the quarterbacks?
I'm a big Drake May guy. I see a higher ceiling with him than any other quarterback not named Caleb Williams, right? Jayden Daniels to me, I don't love him, and I think the more you watch him, the more you kind of be like, okay, he's got a great offensive line. He's got great receivers. He doesn't have the most extraordinary arm. It's an extremely late breakout age after a transfer. He was fantastic. I mean, you don't see a guy put up his numbers ever. He had the 500-yard game with 300 yards passing, 200 yards rushing. What is that? But can you do that in the NFL? Probably not, right? And, if you go back and watch a guy like Vince Young, right, one of these great college quarterbacks ever, their instinct is to tuck and run and not always to read the field. And I see that with Jayden Daniels sometimes. I still like him as a player, extremely accurate downfield, obviously can run, but I just think he's a cut below the top 2.
I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line, because I think that's such an underrated part of LSU's system when we talk about everything they had going for them. The quarterback who won the Heisman, and I think he was a deserving Heisman, even though he doesn't really project to the NFL as well. But and the receiving talent obviously is at the top of this draft class. But the line is just fantastic, and the line it's got to be one of the best in the country. I'm not totally familiar with every single college program's offensive line and where they stack up, but man, LSU's was. It was Zach Wilson pockets for him sometimes back there.
And that's in the SEC. They're going to have a first round pick next year at right tackle, and then they're going to have a probable top 10 pick next year at left tackle with Will Campbell. So they've got a tremendous duo.
And I would say that on Twitter sometimes, and I'd get comments that say, like, actually, they allowed the most pressure of any SEC team from some commenters. And I'm like, if that's true, Jayden should not be drafted. Like, that is not what I saw on tape at all, was those guys allowing pressure. So I think I'm that's with you
absolutely the biggest concern with Daniels is him taking pressure. I don't think it's even a question. I mean, we're talking about like pressure to sack rate, for instance, it's been really bad for Daniels for a lot of his career. And him taking pressures and taking some sacks behind one of the best offensive lines in the country is not only like a disaster, I think, in terms of like where you project him to be, but it's the type of thing that typically does not get that much better, you know? So again, I agree. I really like the mobility. I like the deep accuracy. He's my quarterback 3 still. But if I had to guess, I'd say he's probably going to run himself into a lot of contact and get banged up, and he's probably going to take a lot of sacks and get banged up. And there's just not a lot of good QBs that take a lot of sacks. So,
yeah, I constantly give him, and I think we all on here give him that very Justin Fields-esque comparison to the type of quarterback he could be in the NFL. I am curious, Bengal. I think, Theo, you've come around on Penix a little bit more recently.
Not really. I've come around on him in the sense, I think, more that the JJ and Daniels hype I cannot buy into.
Okay.
But
yeah,
Penix
like
has
soured
kind of
more
his
on the
share
other
of problems as
quarterbacks.
well.
I get that. But I've seen a lot of people say that, like, well, Penix Pro Day was super nice, and you know, he does seem to be kind of passing all the medical traits, and that does seem to be his big concern. Would you rather have like a Penix in the second than like Daniels in the first?
Probably not. And that's on the basis that I think, even though Jayden Daniels does have a problem with pressure, I think we'd agree, he has the physical tools to be able to improvise out of those. Michael Penix, I don't care what they said he ran at his pro day. The guy cannot improvise at all. And if you can't do that in the modern NFL, you're limited as a player. And we have really only seen Penix. It's like the Jayden Daniels experience, but in the pack, except he can't run. It's all outside the numbers. It's all downfield. There's nothing over the middle of the field, and that scares me with Penix. And again, it's not because he can't necessarily do it. I keep having that conversation, but you need to be skeptical with things you haven't seen. Zach Wilson is a good example for me of a player I missed on because no pressure at BYU. Just saw him just sling the ball around the entire field regularly. I mean, I have not seen a better quarterback at hitting outside throws from the far hash to the other sideline than Zach Wilson. Hull shots, deep outs, whatever it was, he could do it. And then he got pressure in his face at the NFL level, and he completely collapsed as a player. So it really put into my mind that, okay, just because you haven't seen a player handle it doesn't mean they can or can't. There needs to be a healthy skepticism regarding the entire thing as a whole. You're going to miss on players for one reason or another the longer that you do this. You just got to be able to figure out not only how to learn from your mistakes, but realize that maybe sometimes they're not just mistakes. You're just not considering how a player develops or what new challenges they're going to face at the NFL level and how they will rise to the occasion. Some guys do, some guys do not. We'll see what Daniels and Penix can do.
Yeah. Do you have any idea? Yeah, I was about that's the same thing, Matt.
Yeah,
but do you have any idea of
Daniels is there and you want to take him, or would you rather take one of the top receivers?
If Daniels is there at 6, I would draft him purely on the basis that it's more difficult to find a quarterback down the board, and this is a really talented receiver class. And if you look at the best receivers in the league, they're not all top 10 or first round picks even, right? You know, you can go on for days about Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. And obviously there are the instances of first round receivers that are beasts. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Justin Jefferson, obviously at the back end of that first round there. But you can find a receiver later. I think if the QB's there, you take the QB. Would I trade a future first round pick to move up for Jayden Daniels? I don't know about that. I would for Drake May, just because I think the physical tools are so amazing. And if you look back to 2022 and see what he's able to do with better pieces around him, he was phenomenal. So 2023 went a little bit worse. People are down on him. He's got correctable mistakes. He's super young. I love Drake May, but we'll see how he develops. Situation is everything.
Yeah, I do find it interesting how Drake May and Caleb Williams both had infinitely worse situations than Jayden Daniels did in college.
It was the best of any quarterback. Maybe you can say JJ McCarthy, but
McCarthy's another one. Yeah,
he
McCarthy
wasn't able to be.
It was not
optimized.
as good as as
No.
Jayden's, though. Like
Two first-round receivers at LSU. Roman Wilson's good.
Roman
Colston
Wilson
Love's
ain't.
great.
Yeah.
But you have two first-round receivers. I would almost guaranteed. Brian Thomas Jr. falling into the first round would really, really surprise me. Two future first-round picks at tackle. Will Campbell's a guarantee. Emery at right tackle is a maybe, but he's very good. And then, Jayden Daniels, not too bad of a schedule for LSU either in terms of being able to beat up on some of the worst defenses. Like, this is the worst defense we've seen from a lot of these SEC teams in a while. And that's obviously like a small piece of it, but it is a piece.
Would you take one of the quarterbacks over like Alt? Do you think there's any chance that the Evan Neal experiment is over and they go with a right tackle at 6? I never.
When you
hear
say
that
one of the
mock,
quarterbacks, do you mean like Drake May, for example? If he were to be available at 6, for example, you're saying Alt over May?
No, I guess when I say that, I mean JJ, who I would also like your thoughts on, or Daniels. I just feel like May falling. I guess it's possible, but excluding him, I guess. Do you think, like, how far does the positional value go for you? Is it the receivers because you think that there's a long history of getting those guys in the second round, which there is? I just saw a tweet about like the highest paid receivers in the league, and hardly any of them are first round picks. I think just Calvin Ridley is right now. Obviously, the Justin Jefferson extension and the Chase extension hasn't come yet. But like at this current moment, I think there's only one first round pick in the top 10 highest paid receivers. So is that a receiver specific thing? Or when you start to look at the other holes that the Giants have, could you see them maybe spending is there any way you see the 6th overall pick not being spent on a quarterback or wide receiver, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think there's a chance, right? But to me, I know Evan Neal has not been good, but he's also making a transition to a different position. Of course, college left tackle and right guard, if I remember correctly. He was someone that projected to be pretty safe. I think he did actually play a little bit of right tackle as well, but I think he was very limited, if I remember correctly. This is a few years back now. But he's been, we'll say, making the transition to right tackle. He's a natural left tackle. If you watched him, that was why he was a top 10 pick. Right?
Yeah.
He's been injured. That's difficult. So not only are you changing positions, but you're having to fight through injury and the New York media, if that means anything. I don't really care about that, but who knows how it affects an individual player. And how many games have we actually seen from Evan Neal? I would say it's less than 20, maybe 20. So I would say for just a guy going into his 3rd season, he's 23 years old right now. We're going to see first round picks that age or older this year, probably. Evan Neal's played 20 career games, exactly. So I want to see another year of it. And maybe you move him to left guard and have him playing a more natural left side of the line. Maybe you stick him at right tackle. I don't know what happened with Jermaine Illuminor, but I'm not ready to give up on Evan Neal yet. It's a really talented tackle class. And I think that almost means you can wait on one if you're going to take a tackle. So I would say I'm in on receiver just because I think it's the biggest chance of getting a game changer, and the Giants are severely lacking in that department. I mean, Saquon was their biggest playmaker, and he's gone now. And even though he's a running back, he was the offense. You look at receiver, who can actually separate and win 50-50 balls? Nobody.
How long has it been since they've had a guy that can do that? Probably
Odell.
since Odell.
Yeah, Odell. And that he was traded, 2019?
Yeah. Been a minute.
Hodgins for a couple of games.
Agree. I look at their
Plus,
offense
if you took
right now,
you'd have to. If you took
have to
Alt,
move him over as well.
Anyway,
it's so easy to say Joe Alt is like the best tackle prospect. Everyone's saying, oh, you can put him on the offensive line. He's a 10-year starter. He's an all-pro. It's like, you know how rare that is for anybody? Like, that's not impossible, right? But it's improbable for any player. It's so rare to get that. And what were we saying about Evan Neal a few years ago? Oh, this guy,
exactly.
he's super athletic freak. He's going to be a 10-year starter, blah, blah, blah. All this garbage that comes out. How do you know you don't have the same exact problem if you move Alt over to right tackle? I don't know.
Sorry, Matt. I just wanted to make that point before we moved on.
No,
what were you going to say?
I think ultimately what it comes down to is like, as long as you're right, you won't really care looking back whether or not you went receiver or tackle. You'll care if you got the best player among them. So I wouldn't be mad at all if I were the Giants.
So you think ultimately they should go with a receiver?
I would go with a receiver, personally.
Just wanted to throw out the bad pun there. I know it was already almost a rhetorical question, but we'll take it.
Who is your QB3? Is it Jayden or JJ? We just talked about Jayden and some of the flaws. Do you see more flaws with McCarthy?
No, I do think it's Jayden Daniels. I like JJ. I actually do. I just think that it's a lot of projection with him. We haven't really seen a ton of it, but you see one or two really good throws a game, and then you're like, okay, there's something there. And he's also super young. I don't really care about the winning thing. I know that's it sounds stupid, but I when you're behind maybe the best offensive line in college football, we just talked about LSU, Michigan. Right. I mean, they're right up there. If they're not number one, they're certainly number 2 or 3 at the worst. And they just ran the ball every play. And what I keep saying is that, these college teams, they're not trying to make great prospects. They're trying to win games. And that maybe isn't the best for JJ McCarthy, but he was a national champion. Again, I don't care about that. I don't think that really factors into the grade for me. But I think when you can just run the ball every play, you're going to do that. You're not trying to say, hey, JJ, hit this deep post, see if you can bomb the defense and put up a great highlight. I think it's, when it came down to it, 3rd down, 4th down, it's like, shit, we ran the ball. We couldn't actually get a first down. We need you to make a play. He was actually able to do that quite a lot. And this was also someone that was able to go through their progressions, which is more than you can say from a lot of different quarterbacks in this class. So I see someone with potential who seems advanced for their age that we just really haven't seen do it enough. So I think if you told me JJ McCarthy ends up being the most successful quarterback out of this class, it really wouldn't surprise me, because I think he's ultimately going to be probably the 4th quarterback off the board, going to the best situation of all 3 or of all 4 top quarterbacks, if we're going to put him in that top group. And I think if you can develop him, get him more reps, get playmakers around him, I don't really see any reason why he won't be successful. But again, we haven't seen enough of it so far. So if you've told me he was the worst QB out of this class, it also wouldn't surprise me. QB's just so volatile.
Yeah. The offensive line's a good point. We brought it up with Blake Corum. We talk about how, when they do run the ball, it feels like they reset the line of scrimmage a lot of times. My main concern with McCarthy is watching him throw deep outbreaking routes. I feel like a lot of times, I've seen him really hit some high octane throws, over the middle or even on screens and stuff. But when he has to overextend on those
screens,
yeah.
we say the same thing with Caleb Williams, man. You say the same thing with Caleb Williams.
Well, Caleb on an RPO, I've seen him toss that shit underhand.
I'm mostly talking about in terms of power and zip. The arm talent, I think, is there to some extent.
McCarthy's got a very good arm. I don't think
he does have a very good arm. But on those deep outbreaking routes, I feel like he has to overextend a little bit more, and sometimes he tends to sail those.
I think it's mechanical. If you watch him, it's typically to the left side. He opens up, and if you open up too much, it's more you want to get your lead shoulder kind of pointing in the direction of the receiver. If you fly open, it's then all arm, and you can get your mechanics out of sync. And I think that's a correctable mistake for a 21-year-old quarterback.
And I've seen Brett Coleman mention that he is supposedly working on that. That's something that's been you'd hope so. But apparently that's been a high point of emphasis, going into the draft.
I mean, we got to remember, it's so easy to pick apart these guys and build up others. But most of these guys are 20, 21 years old, 22 maybe at the top end of things. And they're not super experienced. They have things to work on. How many guys go into the NFL and just dominate instantly because they're such great technicians? It's a rarity. It really is. So all these guys have a long way to go. Even Caleb Williams, even Marvin Harrison Jr. I'd love to see him get better after the catch. I think that's a big thing that can take his game to the next level. But, it's, even though we can talk about these guys like they're generational players, and they might be as prospects, it's how many of these guys could you comfortably put in day one and say, oh, they're a top 10 or 20 player at their position? 0 of them probably. Right. So every one of these guys has a long way to go.
I personally have a different philosophy with young quarterbacks. I would say if they're not a top 20 player at their position pretty quickly, they're likely
QB is
not
one of the
going to
weird
be
ones
good.
because you only have 32 starters, of course. So
That's
like that
true.
one maybe, but also like even a guy like pick your favorite journeyman quarterback. Let's go Gardner Minshew, who's more a younger one. Is he a better player if you're doing a rankings than Drake May or Jayden Daniels week one? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but yeah, week one they might be because they're going to be more familiar with the scheme, and that's a huge part of playing quarterback because you can be accurate, you can have a great arm, you can be able to hit these tight window throws with the timing and precision, but these NFL vets know exactly when to do that because they're able to throw with anticipation, which is something that not a lot of college quarterbacks can do, really. So I agree with you, Matt, on that. I think quarterback's one of those positions where, like, if you draft Caleb Williams #1 and somebody's ranking Aiden O'Connell ahead of him, yeah, you got a problem. But they're doing it based on like potential and what the prospect can be rather than what they might be week one. Like, who do I think would be better week one? Gardner Minshew or Caleb Williams? It seems ridiculous to say Gardner Minshew, but with the experience in an offense, I know he just is changing teams now. It's not the best example, but the ceiling obviously is higher with Williams, no question. You'd be stupid to argue that.
By week 4, Williams might have him.
Yeah, I mean,
by
you
week,
get what I'm saying, though. Is like how many guys
I do
like
understand.
literally day one.
I mean, Minshew, if you look at it statistically, like Richardson and Minshew weren't too far off last year in a lot of metrics. I think that Richardson was way more explosive, but overall, like the consistency and statistics, you could even make the Minshew argument. I don't think that'll hold at all, but it goes to show what you're saying, that it's not always instant domination. I do think of these quarterback prospects with the second contract in mind, though, when you're talking about the top 10. Like, obviously it's years away. It's a little unfair to them. They're not even in the league. But when you take these guys super high, the expectation becomes, okay, like someday you're going to get $300 million from us. Like we are entrusting you to earn that. And if you don't, it's a disaster because that's the expectation. You draft a guy in a top 10, you're not expecting 4 years of mid play and then you let him go. Like, you are expecting the massive extension. You're going to be the guy for the decade plus. And even from that standpoint, it's like, if I can't really see giving you that contract now or having the tools to become a top, 10th percentile quarterback of the 64 starters and backups, like, where does Lawrence rank and the tools that he has, right? He might be 11 or 12. So like that's the 12th best quarterback, and he's a freak athlete, #1 overall pick. It's hard to get up there. And sometimes with JJ and Jayden, I'm like, they're just not quite the athletes. They're not quite the processors. I just don't know if they're going to ever have the ceiling to be a top, like a $300 million quarterback. So I don't want to give them those expectations. It is. It is. And it's like, that's
going to be when you see what he gets paid and it's $50 million a year over at least 5, probably. Whew, that's going to be a fun day.
It is going to be a fun day. And most people are going to hate it, right? But they're still probably going to give it to him. So I don't know. I think if I was the Giants, I would kind of forget about quarterback for a year, and I'd probably want to draft a wide receiver, even if Jayden or McCarthy was available to me at 6. But that's just my philosophy, I guess. They're kind of screwed either way. Do you agree with that? Like, are you?
I don't
do you think
really
Dable survives?
I don't think the top 4 quarterbacks even make it to 6. I almost think it's a moot point. I think we're like, you're probably talking about a trade up because, like, we got to think the Vikings are moving up, right? You trade for number 23 because you want 23, like maybe, but that's an early move to go and get ammo. Is what it looks like.
Somebody else wants 23 this early, I guess.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
That move is so funny.
It's not a great day 2, so maybe just in this draft class, I like some team up top is like, if we trade back with you, we don't want your second rounders. Like, we think there's kind of a cutoff around that 23 range.
And I kind of agree, but why would Minnesota need to make that move to trade it? Why couldn't they trade what they gave up to get it immediately? And it's like, well, they have somebody lined up who they know wants 23. Okay, where's that move then? when is that coming? It doesn't quite, I don't know, make sense to me. I'm sure there's something behind the scenes. And I guess my question is, okay, so you're very much in the idea that like teams can screw over quarterbacks by like missing with the development, which I don't disagree with. If the Giants did go and even trade up for May, which if I were the Giants and had the opportunity to do, I'd probably do it. Do you think they have the infrastructure in place to develop him properly? Because I'd be pretty worried about the receiver room. I mean, as a Panthers fan, we saw how that went.
Yeah, I mean,
for Brett.
with the receivers, you're hoping Jalen Hyatt takes a step up. I think his ceiling is, at least right now, how it looks, somewhat limited. I think he's just really a deep threat. But I mean, people love Troy Franklin, and what is Troy Franklin only good at? It's running down the field. So it's not like Troy Franklin hate. I'm just saying he's a deep threat. Let's be realistic about what his role is going to be.
I'm very here for Troy Franklin hate, man. Let's do it.
I'm not much of a hater anymore. I'm more of a, if I don't like someone, it's better to stay quiet and let people like who they like. So I'm not going to give you a soundbite today, but I would say, like, the Giants offensive line, they're making strides to get better. They have the best left tackle in the division now that Tyron Smith is gone, and Andrew Thomas was already a top 5 left tackle in football. Already, he's great. They brought in John Runyon Jr., who he's going to play right guard, is my review of him.
He's one of the right guards.
Yes.
He
might play left, actually.
He's going to play right guard after the other guy gets listed as a top 5 tackle. It's not inspiring to me.
John Michael Schmitz, you hope, takes a step up. I mean, there were talks about him going in the first round last year. He's a good center prospect, had a little bit of a rough rookie year. I think he got injured when the Giants tried to run the Philly QB sneak. He was a disaster. And then they brought in Jermaine Illuminor, who's actually okay. And he's a good 6th offensive lineman. If Evan Neal takes any type of a jump up, you have a decent offensive line.
Maybe a stance change for Evan Neal. Did they fire their offensive line coach that everybody
they brought
hated?
in Carmen Brasillo with the Raiders.
Okay.
So he was good. Look at Colton Miller, how he developed.
Well, yes, Colton.
Jermaine Illuminor ended up being a pretty good player. He's fine. And then to Matt's question with the receivers, you can take a receiver on day 2 and feel great about it. I feel fantastic about the receiver that will be there at 47 if the Giants choose to do that, if they go a different direction at number 6. The receiver available at 47, whoever it will be a very solid player. I feel really good about that. And yeah, they don't have the guy, maybe, or certainly. They definitely don't have the guy. But I think, whoever you draft in the top 50 is going to be in contention to be the receiver 1 on your team. And that's exciting.
Any wide receiver that is your favorite amongst the...
I'm higher on Keon Coleman than everybody else, and I've got beat on the guys that don't separate super elite in the past. But I think Keon Coleman's got better potential than a lot of those guys because, and I always say, I'm how many 6'4", 215-pound punt returners can you name? 0.
Yeah,
Keon Coleman was doing it at FSU. The guy's got some wiggle. He moves differently than the other just big-bodied possession receivers.
Yeah. They never gave him any breaking routes to run. I feel like watching him in that offense was a painful experience because Johnny Wilson kind of fit the same archetype that he did. And so many times between the 20s, I'd see them using Johnny Wilson and Keon is just on a fade where he's walking or a hitch. And it's they throw the contested catch to Wilson. It's why do you have 2 just vertical ball winners on the same team? It was just a marriage I didn't like. And Coleman, they would give him the ball on these smoke screens, and he's just not a catch it and make dance and make people miss type of guy. He I think he's a catch and run it. He has that touchdown versus LSU on a slant where he caught it and the footwork was great, made the safety miss and took it to the house. Catching it and turning upfield, I think he can do, but he just never got any opportunities to do it. He would run fades in the red zone, and then occasionally they'd throw him a screen so he didn't go on a Twitter rant about him. I heard apparently he said to some people don't go to FSU. Like, it was a mistake for me to transfer there, is what one FSU reporter told me. So I agree that, like, I think he transferred to maybe the wrong spot and has more potential than like the analytics give him credit for. I agree with that.
I would say even like it's noticeable on tape too for me, but I mean, you look him do the gauntlet drill at the combine, and he posted the fastest time of anybody doing it, like the GPS time over 20 miles per hour. I mean, I think that's an analytic like piece of data to back up what you see. And yeah, the route running's not super evolved, but he's also 6'4", 215. How many like big time route runners are that size? And you look at the
and
Giants.
He's 20.
Yeah. Also, that any transferred to a new team, so a new receivers coach, of course. And you look at the Giants specifically because we're focusing on them here. Wan'Dale Robinson is your slot receiver. You drafted him, number 50 a couple of years ago, to be the slot type gadget guy. So I think that takes Malachi Corley out of the mix, right? You have Jalen Hyatt as your deep threat of the future. He can do that very well. What do the Giants need is a big-bodied ball winner, and that's what Keon Coleman is. And I feel like the more we look at it, the more it seems he might be an option at 47. I can get excited about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's what you brought in Waller to be. Right. So
he's like every day he's like, it's like Jim and Pam on The Office with will I, won't I retire? And he won't make a decision. And you're like, can you please? Because this could certainly impact the team. But either way, with the fact that he's like, well, I don't know, will I, won't I? You got to plan for him.
Right.
And Daniel Bellinger's tight end too. I actually like him, but I mean, he's not a game breaker. So I don't know. The Giants trading back and getting Brock Bowers would break everything, and I don't think I'm here for it actually. But he's very good.
No,
but no one's talked about it. But I think there's a non-zero chance of that happening.
I definitely think Bowers is going to go higher than people think. I see all these mocks where he falls to the teens or something because of the positional value. I just think that
look
he's
at the
such a
teams
beast.
drafting at the top. If you look at the actual order, it's like who actually can afford to take a tight end in that range. And of course, we can take the top 4 teams out of it. They're not drafting a tight end with one of the first 4. So it's the Chargers at 5, or it's probably not happening, in my opinion. Because the Giants, I think they're highly unlikely to take Bowers at 6. Maybe the Titans could, but I look at Chigakonkwo and I go, even though he's not Brock Bowers, I go, they probably don't need Brock Bowers at number 7 when they have a desperate need at both tackle spots. They could still upgrade receiver. The Falcons, obviously, you'd hope won't take a tight end.
No, please God, not the Falcons.
The Bears have Cole Kmet. I don't think you take a tight end there. And they also brought in Gerald Everett and maybe somebody else as well. The Bears, I don't think would be taking a tight end at 9. So you get to the Jets at 10 is the next real possibility. But I don't really see where Bowers go. The Vikings, I don't think would take him with TJ Hawkinson. Maybe the Broncos, but their defense is so bad and they need a quarterback. If they take a tight end at 12, I think there'd be riots in the streets. It's hard to figure out a spot for him to go as good as he is.
I think the Jets is a great spot for him. I mean, I think they still need another weapon. So it's lame, but in so many of the mocks that I do, I have them at 10.
I don't think it's lame to put something that makes sense, right? It's just like that's 2 possibilities. It feels like of 2 teams that actually could at 5 and 10. So it's tough to project him as a top 10 pick when it seems like only 20% of teams picking in the top 10 would even consider him as an option. And maybe it's really more than that, but I don't know. It's tough. He's just so good, but at one of those positions, like if we really liked a safety in the class, which there's not one that I'm super infatuated with, like, could you still project a safety inside the top 10 because of the positional value? And then beyond that, it's, you can at least play 2 safeties on the field, if not 3. With the tight end, you're not drafting a tight end number 2 for your offense inside the top 10 or 15 or 20 or in the first round period. So it's tough.
Yeah. I just wonder how much, like, it's a copycat league. And I feel like we've seen some of these teams draft guys whose positional value made them fall down the board, like the Lions last year with Gibbs, and they took him even before like I had a talent grade on him. Like it wasn't just a positional value thing. Like, oh, he would have gone 5th overall if he wasn't a running back with this amount of talent. Like 12 was kind of shocking either way. But the fact that it kind of worked out for them, Kyle Hamilton to the Ravens, like he fell because of the positional value thing, and Roquan for the Ravens as well. Like they gave up a 2nd round pick and paid an off ball linebacker, and then these and McCaffrey, their running back, they gave up a ton for him in a trade and that all worked out. So I'm wondering if like less of an onus will be on positional value this year, because there's been some examples of teams fading players and maybe getting burned, or teams buying the stock of players who are falling because of positional value and it working out for them. So maybe this year, like the Chargers, the Giants, the Titans, the Jets may all consider Brock Bowers, because that's the kind of move that I feel like has worked out a lot recently. But anyway, I digress.
They might.
I want to talk to you about the Texas players too, and get a gauge on their draft stock, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, people were giving Texas so much trash a couple of years ago because 0 players drafted. It's like, yeah, that stinks. They were going through a transitional period with the transfer portal. Now you can just leave if you're not happy or if your coach leaves. So Texas, like all their good players, either came back or left in the portal, and they had nobody drafted. And now it's like you see what an actual recruiting class of Steve Sarkisian can do, when most of these guys were Steve Sarkisian guys. Some of them not. Some like T'Vondre Sweat, I think was the year before. But like this is what happens when you actually have a coach in there that can build up a program. Texas has arguably the best group of players going to the draft than any school. Like obviously Alabama, Michigan, but Texas has, before T'Vondre Sweat DUI, you're going to say probably like 6 or 7 players maybe inside the top 100. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, it's a great class for one school, and I kind of want to go through and build maybe a big board of just Texas players, and where you have them ranked, starting with number 1 of all these Texas guys. Who is your favorite? Who's the first guy you think will be drafted, or that you would draft? Who's Texas player 1 in this class?
I think it's Byron Murphy. He plays a super valuable position now. We have IDL being valued higher than ever, and for good reason, because interior pressure that gets to the QB faster than anything, right? If you have a dominant interior defensive lineman like an Aaron Donald, like a Chris Jones, like a Dexter Lawrence, it can really do great things for a defense. And I think Murphy's got that potential. I mean, I tapped into your, I saw it on Twitter. I don't know what it was on, some type of live stream. Yeah. Looking at Byron Murphy, and I mean, you can see some of the fun things he's able to do. He moves from 3 tech to 1, plays over the center, of course, at times. And T'Vondre Sweat is kicked out to 3 tech. And how is the 380-pound guy, which was his playing weight in 2023, how is that guy playing 3 tech? And Byron Murphy, the 295-pound defensive tackle, I know he's up to 307 at the combine. How is that guy playing the nose? Well, it's because he's so strong. He gets so low. Nobody plays with a better pad level in this draft than Byron Murphy. And he's got such tremendous strength and speed. I think he gives you a player that can both rush the passer and defend the run at a high level. And that screams best player at that position in the draft. And, a lot of people love Johnny Newton, and I do as well. But I don't even think it's comparable between Murphy and Newton as run defenders. And that's a really big part of playing defensive tackle, is you need to be able to stop the run. And Murphy is so good at holding the point of attack, but can also shed and make plays. Yeah, I love him as a player. He's number 1 for me.
Yeah, Murphy's got that ability to kick inside and play nose that I think Newton does not. He's so talented taking on the doubles.
Does that mean you have Mitchell at 2?
I actually think he and Worthy are pretty close. I know people are down on Worthy, but for me, it's kind of like how Jordan Addison, people got down on him at the end of last cycle. It's like, yes, being able to catch the ball in traffic is important, but if you are so adept at getting open that it's less of an issue, I think you can see a ton of success in the NFL. Look at Jordan Addison. Not saying Xavier Worthy to Jordan Addison is my comp, for example, but it's 2 guys that can get open. If you watch Worthy, you will see that he can actually work open underneath relatively easily. I mean, the guy is always open underneath. Curls, comebacks, ins, obviously slants, caught screens. He's a dynamic player as a punt returner. I think he's a really, really fun player. And even though he comes out and runs the fastest 40-yard dash ever, which is so cool, if you look at him, being a deep threat was not the biggest part of his game at Texas. And
it can't be with Quinn Ewers throwing him the football.
I abstain from comment on that one. I really like Xavier Worthy. Is he higher than Adonai Mitchell? Well, production would say yes, but I think Mitchell is more likely to be an X receiver in the NFL with size and route running ability. He can play above the rim. But to your question, Matt, I do think those top two receivers are close. It's like asking me to pick my favorite child in a way, right? Because I like both of them. They're very different players. I think they can both be very impactful pros, but those would be the next two. And then T'Vondre Sweat, he was just so dominant when he wants to be, but it's so tough because when we're grading these guys, we have access to the film, if we even have that much, and we don't have access to the interviews and all the background information. And Sweat was a party animal, and the class clown, and teams don't necessarily like that. They want a guy who's focused on football, wants to play, wants to get better. Sweat took that more seriously in 2023, had an unbelievable breakout year, wins the Outland for best total lineman in college football. Dominant player when he wants to be. Also plays nose tackle. Those guys can be kind of replaceable. It's like the running back of the defense in a way, because you can just stick somebody who's 340 pounds in there and say, hey, eat up a couple blocks. Guys can do that. It's a combination of, can you do more than that? Plus, are you able to do that on a consistent basis? If you're playing at 380 pounds, you're not going to be able to. Sweat only played like 30 or 35 snaps a game, and that it's a limited amount, right? And you look at Jordan Davis from Georgia. He comes in, he plays like 20 snaps a game. Like there's not a ton of impact to be made with such a limited amount of playing there, in my opinion.
There was.
I definitely.
We all started talking at the same time. I'll shut up.
Matt, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I definitely agree with you on slider receivers still being able to be good. I mean, if last year didn't prove it, I don't know what will, because it's not just Addison's. Downs as well was super good, and he was light. In fact, I felt like almost all of those guys last year were incredibly light. So I agree that doesn't move Worthy down my board maybe as much as it would have a little while ago. But the other thing I was going to ask you, and maybe this gets us a little bit further, so I don't want to step on your toes, Blaine, but I was going to ask you, that means you're a little bit lower on Sanders as well.
I just like all of them. But here's my concern with Ja'Tavion Sanders, separating myself from my Texas bias, is I think he was schemed open more than he got open. And that's tough to project, because Steve Sarkisian, for all his flaws, is great at getting guys open at times. If he wants to, he's going to find a way. And JT Sanders was just open down the field so much. And you could say it's a coverage bust, or you could say it's great play design when Sanders is able to like leak out up the field, and then he's catching the ball 30 yards down the field, runs for an extra 20, and you're like, holy cow, Ja'Tavion Sanders had a 50-yard catch. But when you watch it, is he truly a dynamic special athlete? I think he's a good athlete. He tested worse than I expected, but I think he's still a good athlete, and his hands are amazing, but he's not the best blocker. He's not the best route runner, and he got schemed open a lot. So he does have some detractors, but I think that, T'Vondre Sweat, based on talent, based on ceiling, is a top 50 player. I think Sanders, to me, is a top 50 player. And it's just, what are we going to get in the NFL? He's got to get with a creative play caller, I think. Is he going to be the focal point of an offense in the NFL? No. But I still think he can be quite good, especially as a red zone threat. So we'll see. I mean, the guy doesn't drop the ball. That's super important.
His hands are great. Everything else, maybe not. But I found it hard to evaluate all the Texas guys on offense a little bit. Like
so
Mitchell,
much RPO, so many swing screens. Yeah,
so many. And so many half-field reads. And if Mitchell is on the other half of the field on a half-field read, he's not even he's just standing there, man.
Yeah,
and,
he said
sometimes
that he was running routes at 85% every time, so he could just stay on the field.
that's a
for the
high
whole
number.
drive.
He's lying too.
Yeah.
Like he's trying to make it sound honest. Like, yeah, I was taking 15% off to try to sound real. Like, bro, you were taking 90% off, man.
Yeah, and
Same
you do
thing
see
on
that from time to time. But I mean, he would probably just get taken off the field in the NFL. So I don't know.
Right.
It's a tough call.
exactly.
You want him to
really
sell,
hard
obviously, so the corner doesn't know if he's involved in the progression or not. But yeah, I don't know. The potential is there, and it's like with the draft, you can get killed on going against potential because a guy could just end up being amazing if they have the physical tools. Mitchell has that for sure, and I've never missed bigger than on Josh Allen. I'm like, this guy stinks, but biggest arm of all time, almost, right? Dynamic runner. He's a tight end playing quarterback that developed accuracy once he reworked his entire throwing mechanics. And then he's, what would we say, top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league? I think Allen's number 2 for me.
Yeah, we would
so,
say
I mean,
that.
It's so easy to get burned on a guy with high potential. You just say, oh, yeah, he's so raw. Like Chop Robinson, right? I don't know how you guys feel about him, but I mean, super raw as a player, but the ceiling is unbelievable because he's such a freak athlete. It's like, are you going to doubt that guy? Because, we haven't seen it at a high level just yet. Or are we going to say maybe he develops a little bit and he becomes one of the better pass rushers in the league? Because that's a ceiling for a player like that.
Yeah. Same. There are a couple of other guys in that class. Like Mitchell is one of them because the dude is like 6'4" Stephon Diggs. But he doesn't try half the time, so it's kind of weird, right? But oh my, like he is the freakiest of freaks. Same thing with Brian Thomas Jr., like 6'4", 4.33. Like is he Megatron? Like who is this guy? Like he is a monster, but he's definitely the rawest route runner of all the highly regarded prospects. And then Mims is the other one for me, who's like that. Like that guy is. How much does he weigh? 340 pounds, like 6'7".
It's
like
tough. He and Latham have very inconsistent weight. Like if you look at Alabama versus the Combine and Georgia too with Mims, Latham's been listed anywhere from like 335 to 370, and I'm like, what does he actually weigh? Because that's a pretty huge difference. That's like a big dog on top of 335 to like whatever 380.
He ate a Great Dane. Yeah, no doubt. But Mims, like he hasn't even worked out really. Like he got hurt at the Combine. He didn't do any testing at the Pro Day. All his games are against like Stony Brook. Like
if you look at 2020, 2022, he came in, became the starter for the college football playoff run and was very
But he
good.
wasn't before that. He was very good. I like Mims.
Yeah, he came again late in the year in 2022.
Yeah, he started at the beginning and then like didn't start for a while, and then like I guess it was time to play the college football playoff games, and they're like, time to stop fucking around. Let's put in Mims again. But just one of the weirdest players. To me, those are the 3 that after kind of the blue chip players, the guys are could be stars. Like Neighbors is in that tier, right? Adunze, you know the guys at the top, Bowers. Like after those guys, then I think you start to have to swing on potential, knowing that you may miss really badly, and that's where Mitchell and Mims and Thomas Jr. come in for me. But that's kind of an aside as we're ranking these Texas guys. Like Mitchell's just a tough eval. Worthy's kind of a tough eval. Like, is he a great deep threat? I think he could be. Like Ewers was bad. So it's tough to know how he is he looked like he could track the ball pretty well. And then it's scheme dependent too, Worthy. Like if you have him playing as an X receiver and you ask him to beat press, he's not going to be very good. But if you put him in motion and he ends up in Miami and he's in the back of a stack with a free release, like, and he's running digs all day, like he might be money. So yeah, I think all the Texas guys are so tough to evaluate this year outside of Byron Murphy, who is just like a good defensive tackle, like a really good defensive tackle.
It's interesting when you talk about Sweat and Mitchell and like their effort concerns or like their desire for football or whatever, because you can point to Davis and talk about his snap counts in the NFL, but you can also point to like DeJuan Jones, who there was a lot of concern with him as to how committed he was, and he was came in for Cleveland and was able to jump in and be one of the kind of best tackles in football this year.
And he got crushed. I think that's what's so interesting about him is that he was getting some like borderline first round hype. Now, how true that actually was, I question because of how low he got taken. But when
he got 106 or something like that.
Yeah, like the fourth
round.
So I figured, okay, maybe he wasn't quite getting first round hype, but he probably was getting some high day 2 hype. And to fall out of that completely, people must have like really disliked what they saw in interviews, or maybe they thought that the weight was always going to be an issue or that it wasn't going to work out. And then he comes in year 1, mind you, not as a guy who's like, well, he's going to have to develop year 1, but played some pretty good ball. So it's tough to guess. And I think even if we had the interviews, we wouldn't know.
It would be so subjective. It would all be subjective. So.
I remember DeJuan Jones showing up at the Senior Bowl and weighing in like a comically high amount. Like he was like 400 pounds or some shit. Yeah. And then he like worked out for one day and then left.
Well, he was so dominant in the one-on-ones.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find his weight here. But yeah, he was dominant. And then like a lot of those guys they dominate and they're like, I'm good. I mean, I showed everything I need to show. Jermaine Johnson is another one of those guys that just showed up, dominated, and was like, that's all the Senior Bowl I need to do.
Powers Johnson had a situation like that where he dominated early, and then I don't think he was there the rest of the week. But that may have been an injury thing with him, which is why he's sort of falling, it seems like, even though I love him. But
yeah, he's really good.
But yeah, what else do we have to talk about? We were gonna ask who's your favorite defensive player in the draft? It's so offensive heavy.
Favorite for me is actually kind of easy. I think it's Leatu Latu. I mean, he was someone I found in 2022. Just obviously, you grind film for the year, and you see so many games, and Latu is just one of those guys that immediately stood out. I'm like, who in the hell is number 15 on UCLA? I think it's ranked 15. He's just such an unbelievable technician. I think he is an underrated athlete, and
definitely.
He is the easiest one for me to project and say that's going to be a good NFL player. And for Dallas Turner, you're projecting based on athleticism. He's good against the run. He's a fine pass rusher. He's not elite like Latu is right away. And I think with Verse, very different players, but Verse, big power, good athlete as well. But Latu for me is just the most refined of all of them by a lot. And that's because he is one of the most refined pass rushers we've seen in the past few years. And his combination of the pass rush plan, what I mean by that, with coming in mind with what your first move is going to be and what the counter is going to be if it doesn't work based on what the offensive tackle does. And he is so good at going to multiple counter moves if need be. And the effort is extraordinary. And of course, he didn't get worse in 2023. I'll tell you that. I just think he is amazing. I'm worried with the injury stuff, but I mean, if you look at the complete package here, he is 6'5", 260, ran 4.64 with a 10-yard split at 1.62, all pretty good. Like ideally, the 10-yard split is 0.02 of a second faster, but like I'm okay that it's not. And has incredible hands. You go, that's a top 10 pick. Why is he not? The injury stuff, obviously.
But that's the thing is like the injury thing is a concern, but he's been the most productive pass rusher for the past 2 years. I don't know what else you can really ask for him at this point. And he can play like all across the defensive line. I've been watching some of the running back tape and there's even plays where, he's lining up 3 tech and he's winning against guards. And I'm like, what more can you possibly ask of this guy other than
that's an unfair matchup for any guard. He's just way too fast.
Exactly. And I'm like, he's just destroying inside zone just by himself because he just obliterates the guard. And I'm just like, there's nothing else he could do. I keep seeing Dallas Turner get mocked to Atlanta at 8. And I agree they should take an edge defender, but I'm getting to the point where I think it would be a pretty big mistake to pass on Latu.
I just get why Latu is not one of the top guys, or like not as not one of the top guys, but it isn't like a Myles Garrett or like a Walker. Like, oh my God, this guy might be the number 1 overall pick because the injury stuff and the age stuff, and he's not like a generational athlete, I guess. But you take all those negatives and you get on the field in week 1, and 2 of the 3 are not going to matter at all. And I really don't think he's a bad athlete to the point where it's going to hinder him. So I think Latu is a very valid defensive player 1.
Yeah. You will find no argument from us about Latu defensive player 1. I'm not quite sure if there's anybody even in his tier. Both the defensive tackles are good, Newton and Murphy. I think they're in conversation. I like Nate Wiggins a lot as well, but that's not the case with everybody. Yeah, but Latu is defensive player 1. That's a good take, in my opinion.
I got one more question for you. Going back to the Giants, what do you think they will do? What do you think will happen? Because they're a tough team to project.
I think they take a receiver. I think if they want to, they'll trade up. I have no idea whether they will or not. So I'm going to assume they stay at 6. And I really do expect the first 4 picks to be quarterbacks. Maybe McCarthy falls. Even Daniels, I guess, could be an interesting surprise. But I think the first 3 picks, I would say, are almost guaranteed to be quarterback. I'd be really shocked if Harrison Jr. went at number 3. I still would be. I think the Giants will have their pick of one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in there. I think it's interesting now with, I don't know if you guys have read on this Malik Neighbors stuff, where maybe he's got some off the field concerns that could certainly bother some teams. So if I had to put money on it today, I would go, I think the Giants take Rome Odunze at number 6. That's what I think will happen.
You an Odunze over Neighbors guy or vice versa?
I think they're very different players. If you're making a big board, like team irrelevant, I think you probably take Neighbors based on higher ceiling, more explosive, and not that Odunze is a bad athlete. He's not. But I've said that I think I think Odunze is just worse Harrison, even though he's incredible. And I think Neighbors is a completely different type of player. So if you're wanting, the technician that can beat press and win 50-50 balls, you want Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze. If you want the firecracker, like shot out of a cannon type player that is a monster after the catch, you take Neighbors, and maybe you can see a higher ceiling as a result. Neighbors, I would say, has the highest ceiling, if we want to say that, of any player at receiver in this draft. Maybe even any player, period, just because his ceiling is like probably above Jamar Chase, if you can hit that, because he's even more explosive than Jamar Chase is. But, I mean, obviously, there's a low chance that anyone hits that. Jamar Chase is so good. But, you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
The upside is immeasurable. But Odunze gives you a completely different combination of skills. And there's nobody better against press in this draft, I would say. His body control is amazing. Just like Marvin Harrison Jr., the tough plays look easy. And Odunze is in that same caliber of player that he's just going to come down with the football. And that's extremely valuable. I don't know. I love the receiver class. To answer the question, though, Neighbors over Odunze. Yeah, it really, I hate to do it. It just really depends what you want. It really depends.
Mm-hmm. It's like if you're in trips, it's like Neighbors is in the trips somewhere, and Odunze is the isolated guy on the other side. Like do you have a guy who's going to be isolated on the other side already? If you do, don't take Odunze, take Neighbors. And if you don't, if you want that one-on-one ball winner, you want Odunze. Like on the field, I think that's what it'll look like, the difference between them. Yeah, I agree. I think so too. I think when I do their mocks, I just did a mock with them. I think I had them taking Neighbors. So
that's what I usually do.
And as far as the off the field stuff, I saw a report on that, but it was from like Sleeper, and it was like they're concerned he won't do well in a big city. It's like, well,
like that obviously is a little bit like hearsay almost, but I believe he was arrested for firearm possession on Mardi Gras, and then charges were dropped. Yeah, so this happened. So gun charge against LSU football player dropped after arrest in New Orleans. So I don't know the exact conditions that warranted charges being dropped or whatever, but I know that it happened, and that's kind of a weird thing to get initially charged with if you're just completely just minding your own business. I was in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl with Texas and Washington. I didn't catch a gun charge while I was down there. So, you know, I don't think it just happens to anybody. I don't know. I think that there's something there, but does it scare you or does it not? I don't know.
Me and Blaiden are actually going to New Orleans here relatively soon, so I got to ask, how'd you do it and avoid that?
I think I just look the way I do, and it's my bias. Blaiden could be in trouble, but
there's always. But hey, my girlfriend's white. We're all of my friends are white, so we'll be okay.
Yeah, I don't think.
I'm gonna hold back.
You're gonna hold back.
I want to get crazy, but I don't know. People are gonna take it out of context, and then it's not gonna look like a joke. It's just gonna look like I'm racist, which we don't want that.
We don't want that.
No, we don't want you to be racist.
I don't know how you guys feel, but I wouldn't want it.
I don't want that for you.
Thank you.
I guess I want everybody in the sports media sphere to get exposed as racist and fired, so then I get paid $1 billion and I'm the only one left. Cancel culture has come for everybody else, and then it's just me standing.
Just start making fake tweets and put them out. Did you see what this guy said?
Good idea. Good idea. I'm going to start doing that.
Like AI renderings of different journalists talking, and you'll get away with someone eventually.
Wow, I can't believe the ESPN panel debated.
You're on thin ice, buddy. I'm not even.
What's a good example to use there? Yeah.
Let me think with my racist brain what the best thing would be to say.
You know, I can't even think of any bad thing.
Yeah. Me neither, because I am clean as a whistle.
Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah.
I'm so not racist, I can't even think of a racist example.
I can't even think of a racist topic that they could talk about.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, nothing come to my mind.
If you want to call me a cracker blade, and I'll give you one.
Why would I do that? You didn't insult me.
All right, that's true.
You didn't insult me.
The cracker pass. I don't think we get to hand out a cracker pass. I don't think so. We just
I don't
have
think there
to
is a pass
accept
for
that everybody can say it, and
it's already been done.
It's already been done.
I think everybody's already got that.
Now, if you drop the H word, we could have some problems. Honky?
What?
This has gone downhill.
We have degenerated this episode into I don't even know what at this point. But
well, you should have known that when you invited me on.
Hey,
it's only going one way.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. I imagine we'll have you back on again at some point. But until then, thank you all so much for tuning in. And as always, we will catch you on the flippity flop.